if you believe the darkest chapters of American history were written by enemies overseas, then you are already missing the real story, because some of the most disturbing experiments ever conducted did not happen in secret prisons abroad. They happened inside American hospitals, universities, military bases, and city apartments approved, funded, and hidden by the United States government itself. For years, the victims never knew why their minds shattered. Families never knew why loved ones changed overnight. And the country that prided itself on freedom quietly crossed lines it would later pretend never existed. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not speculation. This is documented history. To understand how it began, you have to return to a moment when fear ruled Washington. The year was 1945. World War II had ended. But peace did not bring relief. Instead, it created a new terror, one that could not be seen on battlefields or measured in bombs. The Soviet Union was no longer an ally. It was now the enemy. And American intelligence believed the next war would not be fought with bullets, but with minds. Reports arrived from Europe describing Nazi experiments on human psychology. At the same time, intelligence briefings warned that Soviet scientists were studying hypnosis, drugs, and psychological manipulation. Some of these reports were exaggerated. Some were misunderstood. But in Washington, fear does not wait for proof. Then came 1949, when the Soviet Union successfully detonated its first atomic bomb. Panic spread through the highest levels of the U.S. government. America's monopoly on nuclear power was gone. If the Soviets could build the bomb faster than expected, what else could they do? Soon after, American soldiers captured during the Korean War began returning home with disturbing stories. Some had confessed to crimes they did not commit. Others spoke favorably about communism. Journalists used a new word to describe it: brainwashing. No one could clearly define what brainwashing meant, but no one doubted its danger. Inside the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency, a belief took hold: the human mind itself had become a weapon, and America was falling behind. CIA leadership became obsessed with one question: could the enemy control thought itself? If the answer was yes, then no military advantage would matter. Soldiers could be turned. Diplomats could be compromised. Presidents could be manipulated. The threat was existential. In response, the CIA did not ask whether such control was moral. They asked whether it was possible. Early programs began quietly. Projects with forgettable names, small budgets, limited oversight. Scientists were recruited, often without knowing who truly funded them. Universities received grants. Hospitals conducted studies. Military labs tested chemicals. At first, the goal was simple: find a truth serum. If a drug could force prisoners to speak honestly, interrogations would change forever. Alcohol was tested. Barbiturates were tested. None produced reliable results. Some made subjects talk. Others made them confused. None delivered control. Then intelligence reports mentioned a strange substance discovered in lysergic acid, diethylamide, known as LSD. The drug was powerful, unpredictable, and terrifying. Early experiments showed that LSD could shatter perception. Time dissolved. Identity blurred. Fear intensified. To CIA scientists, this was not a risk. It was an opportunity. If the mind could be broken chemically, perhaps it could be rebuilt. By the early 1950s, the CIA had crossed an invisible threshold. Research was no longer defensive. It was ambitious. In 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles approved a program. So secret its name was deliberately meaningless. MKUltra. There was no single laboratory, no single method. MKUltra was a network dozens of subprojects operating across the United States and beyond. Its true scope was known to only a handful of men. Its purpose was never written plainly, but internal documents would later reveal its terrifying goals: to control behavior, erase memory, induce compliance, and manipulate belief. Ethical safeguards were dismissed as obstacles. Informed consent was treated as a luxury. National security justified everything. And soon, Americans themselves became the test subjects. Some were prisoners. Some were hospital patients. Some were soldiers. Some were ordinary civilians who had no idea. They had just stepped into history's darkest experiment. They were given drugs without warning. They were observed without knowledge. They were broken without apology. And when things went wrong, as they often did, the evidence disappeared. This was only the beginning. Because once the CIA learned how fragile the human mind truly was, they did not stop. They pushed further. And the consequences would haunt the nation for generations. After the exposure of MKUltra, many Americans assumed the nightmare was over. The program had been terminated. Congress had expressed outrage. Apologies had been issued. On paper, the chapter seemed closed. But history rarely ends where official reports stop. What few people realized was that MKUltra was not a single experiment, nor was it confined to one decade or one method. It was a mindset, one born from fear, secrecy, and the belief that extraordinary threats justified extraordinary actions. And that mindset did not disappear in the 1970s, even before MKUltra officially ended. Similar research was already evolving under new names, new budgets, and new layers of classification. One of the most troubling aspects of MKUltra was how deeply it had embedded itself into respected American institutions, universities that symbolized knowledge, and ethics became quiet, partners in classified research. Hospitals that promised healing became testing grounds. Prisons, already hidden from public view, became laboratories where consent was meaningless. Some professors believed they were contributing to cutting-edge psychology. Others suspected intelligence involvement but chose not to ask questions. A few knew exactly what they were doing and justified it as patriotic duty. The line between science and exploitation blurred. One experiment focused on sensory deprivation. Researchers believed that by removing external stimuli, sound, light, touch, the human mind would become malleable. Volunteers, and often non-volunteers, were placed in small rooms, blindfolded, gloved, ears covered. Hours turned into days. Subjects reported hallucinations. Some lost their sense of identity. Others became emotionally unstable long after the experiments ended. These results alarmed civilian psychologists. To the CIA, they were promising. Another line of research explored hypnosis. Could a person be hypnotized into committing acts against their will? Could memories be implanted or erased entirely? Could a sleeper agent be created unaware of their own programming? The results were inconsistent, but the pursuit continued. Failures were not reasons to stop. They were reasons to push harder. In Canada, MKUltra extended beyond U.S. borders. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted experiments. Funded indirectly by the CIA, Cameron believed mental illness could be cured by completely erasing the patient's personality and rebuilding it from scratch. Patients suffering from anxiety or mild depression were subjected to extreme electroshock therapy far beyond standard medical practice. They were placed into drug-induced comas for weeks. Recorded messages were played to them repeatedly, sometimes thousands of times. Many patients left unable to recognize family members. Some lost basic life skills, including reading and speaking. Their lives were permanently altered. They had come for help. They became casualties. For years, these patients had no idea the CIA was involved. When the truth finally emerged, lawsuits followed. Compensation was paid, but no amount of money restored what was taken. Back in the United States, the CIA faced growing pressure in the late 1970s to reform. Executive orders were issued. New oversight committees were formed. Human experimentation rules were strengthened. But secrecy remained the intelligence community's most powerful shield. Much of what is known about MKUltra comes not from transparency, but from mistakes. Files misfiled. Receipts overlooked. Whistleblowers who refused to stay silent. And even now, historians believe only a fraction of the full story is known. What makes MKUltra uniquely disturbing is not just what was done, but who it was done to. These were not enemy combatants captured on foreign soil. They were American citizens, veterans, students, patients, prisoners, people who trusted their government or had no power to resist it. The Cold War created an environment where fear overruled empathy. Officials convinced themselves that the threat justified the methods, that losing one's moral footing was preferable to losing a geopolitical battle. But the cost was real, and it was human. In the decades that followed, pop culture began to absorb MKUltra's legacy. Films, novels, and conspiracy theories transformed it into myth. Mind-controlled assassins, secret programming, hidden triggers. Some claims were exaggerated. Others were entirely fictional. But the core truth that the U.S. government conducted non-consensual experiments on its own people is not airy. It is documented history, and that reality forces an uncomfortable reflection. Democracies pride themselves on transparency, rights, and accountability. Yet MKUltra thrived precisely because it operated in shadows, shielded by classification and justified by fear. It raises a question that remains relevant today. How much secrecy is necessary for security? And how much secrecy is too much? Because MKUltra did not begin with evil intentions. It began with fear, with officials convinced that the nation faced an existential threat, with people who believed they were acting in the public's best interest. History shows how easily that belief can become dangerous. The Cold War has ended. The Soviet Union no longer exists, but new fears have taken its place. New enemies, new technologies, new forms of psychological influence, and the lessons of MKUltra remain unfinished, because the most powerful weapon is not a bomb. It is not a missile. It is the human mind. And once a government believes it has the right to control that, the line between protection and abuse becomes dangerously thin